Okay, well, thank you all for joining us today. This is the second session of our March Marathon webinar series. We're going to have a market update from our own Ed Ebert today. And we're going to get into a discussion about kind of how we see that we're seeing our hard work pay off, both with the policy efforts that we've pursued over the past several years. We've been asking our members to reach out to the policymakers, to the members of Congress, to the administration, advocating for additional trade agreements, whether they be bilateral agreements, multilateral agreements, just any kind of bump in trade. We've been supportive of that, and we're starting to see the positive results of our work. But also, Ed's going to get into an explanation of what we're doing through our checkoff programs to increase market development for our products, and you'll start to see that picture of how that work is beginning to pay off as well. And frankly, we wouldn't be in the situation in the markets right now if it hadn't been for the investment the farmers have made, both on the policy side, making those asks of members of Congress, but also the investment on our checkoff work with the various cooperators that we have, and putting the expertise on the ground, these foreign countries, to get those markets established. So today's program is sponsored by FMC. We'll be hearing a couple of commercials from them. They're great partners for both the Indiana Corn Growers Association and the Indiana Soybean Alliance Membership and Policy Committee. And I have to just want to add that we could not do the work that we do on policy if it weren't for the corporate partners that we have. And FMC has been such a strong partner of ours for a number of years. And also, we couldn't do this work without our members. So if you are a member, thank you. If not, please consider joining, and we'll be providing information later on how you can be a member of Indiana Corn and Soy. Next up, we've got the message from FMC.
My name is Jay Harper, and we farm in Lake and Newton counties here in Indiana. One reason why we decided to try the Xyway, just cost savings. Margins are tight for everybody. If we're going to spend the money, we want to get the most benefit out of our money and what we're doing. And it just seems like with this in-furrow Xyway, the fungicide, and having that all season, control throughout the season, feels like we're getting the most for our money that we're spending by using that product. When they checked the Xyway plot, when Dan showed me a picture of the roots, the difference in roots just from the check versus the Xyway, and just the roots were so much bigger and looked a lot better than the untreated part of the plot, just to lead to a healthier stalk, and just being able to get all the nutrients that are there available to that plant, and standability, stand better, rooted deeper, better brace roots, throughout the season when that stalk grows, and just a healthier plant. That plant it's taking everything up, through the roots, and when it needs it, okay, if I want a field sprayed, but the airplane can't get there for another 10 days, what am I losing, that route too? So I think there's a lot of benefit to it, having it in furrow like that. It's there when it needs it.
I want to introduce Ed Ebert. He's been with the organization for 5-6 years now. It's been a career in grain marketing, and he can tell you a little more about his background, but we're very fortunate to have his expertise on staff here, and he's going to give us a market update and explain further how checkoff programs are having a positive impact in market development for our farmers. Ed?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. As Steve said, I've been with the organization now for about 5.5 years. I came out of a career of mostly managing grain elevators, oilseed processing facilities in terms of their commercial management, and also a little bit of economic research towards the end of my career with the last multinational that I worked for. So again, thank you for coming today. Before we get started, I'd like to just real quickly talk briefly about the fact that these numbers that you're going to see today and some of the charts and graphs that you'll see are all publicly available. So there's no proprietary information. All of this is available to the public. One of the things that we'd like to start talking about here, at least initially, is what does the planning season look like as we set up going into it. And as you can see, the drought monitor, it's not a good time to be in Nevada or Arizona or parts of California and even parts of Wyoming and West Texas, because it's been very, very dry down there. And so when we look at that in terms of what the market starts thinking of, they start saying, this dryness is also spread a little bit into the eastern portions of the production area as well. The Dakotas, both North and South Dakota, are experiencing various levels of dryness, parts of Nebraska, Iowa, and even starting to trend into parts of northern Indiana, central Illinois, and the northern part of Ohio as well. And it's always instructive to kind of look back in history and see what this looks like from last year. This is that same drought monitor from about the same day 1 year ago. As you can see, we didn't have near the dryness, that reservoir of dryness, and eventually what will become heat building up in the desert Southwest. And certainly it's a much different view when you look at the heart of the production area of the Corn Belt and even in the Minnesotas and Dakotas. So, it's a different view this year, and the markets are going to be looking at that from the perspective of that might put a little bit of an additional risk here, depending upon how our spring weather turns out for sure. One of the important macros that we follow here closely is what crude oil is doing. And as most of you have seen here recently over the last month and a half or so, we've also seen that impact the value of gasoline at the pump. So crude oil, up until about 2 days ago, was in a fairly general upward trend. Of course, we saw this setback here 3 days ago. So it's going to be interesting to see if we can regain that momentum in terms of that upward bias. It's still trading above $60 a barrel for WTI. So again, that's something that we need to look at and follow closely, because it is very important to our overall commodity prices. Ethanol futures, again, show that same kind of upward pattern in terms of its trade here over the last several months now, since, basically the end of November, first part of December, where we saw a nice recovery in the value. Again, that's getting pulled along by crude oil. And as a consequence, we see the same kind of pull, if you will, in terms of what's going on in the value of our corn futures. These are May corn futures in Chicago. And as you can see, we had a very nice upward trend going. What we've seen here now since probably the second week of February, now all the way into March now, it's more of a sideways trading pattern as the market's really trying to sort out what's going on in both South American production, how quickly they'll be able to get their second crop corn planted, and also what is going to come out here at the end of this month in prospective plantings, which USDA will release here next week. If we look at May soybean futures, much the same pattern, although that trend is still trending higher on soybeans. Soybeans have a much more functional balance sheet in terms of its carryout. Even though the market, at least here for the last probably 2.5 weeks now, has been more in this sideways trading pattern, again, waiting for additional information and news out of South America in terms of the overall quality and volume of their production, and also, again, waiting on this report for next week. Now, one of the charts that's really interesting to look at right now is soybean oil. Soybean oil is trading upwards in the mid-50s here. It shows May soybean oil this morning when I captured this chart, trading at 57 cents a pound. That is historically high in terms of value for soybean oil relative to the price of soybeans. So as a consequence, soybean oil contribution to crushing margins, which is an important component to demand here in our country and around the globe, is really it's out of balance, and it's different. And there's a couple reasons why it's different. Probably the most important one here in the U.S. is, number one, we've got a very tight carryout, and it's going to be difficult for crushing plants to be able to operate through the summer this year because of that low carryout of soybeans. And the second reason is even a little bit more clear when you start looking at the amount of soybean oil that's going into biodiesel and renewable diesel production here in our country. The renewable diesel has been has had a huge impact on what's going on with this value for sure. So that's something to think about. Indiana basis in terms of what ethanol plants are paying has been on an upward curve, if you will, since the middle part of December. And again, it's kind of following that same curve with the value in terms of ethanol itself, coupled with farmers it's a little bit tougher for them to turn loose of corn, particularly here in the next 2 to 3 weeks when you guys get out into the field. I would expect this basis level to continue to creep higher as they try and attract bushels to their plants for production for sure. So for the end of this, what to watch, delays in Brazilian corn export program and the delayed plantings of the second crop corn in Brazil, I think are important to the corn market. Equally important to the market on the soybean side is what is that production actually going to come out looking like this year, and what is the overall quality of that crop, because that crop got planted very late this year, back in October and November when they normally are planting it. They had really dry conditions in Brazil and across Argentina even, and it's really led to some serious delays in terms of the shipment program out of Brazil. And I think that's one of these things we have to keep watching. The March Prospective Plantings Report, which is again here on March 31st. That is a big report. It's at noon. So unless you're doing something really important, it probably would behoove you to at least watch the market or listen to the report in terms of what comes out right away in terms of what's hitting your wire services, or if you have DTN machines at home. So again, that's going to be an important report for a lot of different reasons. It's going to kind of set the bar in terms of expectations for spring planting intentions. And it's something you need to pay attention to this year in particular. Ethanol demand and the general economic direction in terms of our economy and global economies, as well as we emerge from these lockdowns from COVID-19. Certainly that also plays a big role in terms of how much fuel demand we're going to see here in the U.S. as we approach the summer driving season. Spring weather forecast, as we've already pointed out in the drought monitors that we looked at earlier, there's some concern emerging in terms of chatter in the market about what does this mean for the long term. Because when you see conditions that dry in North Dakota and South Dakota and parts of Minnesota, what that means is they didn't get a snow cover this year, is what it amounts to. And at the end of the day, that is a very important getting that subsoil moisture in those soils up there for sure. And again, we're going to have very timely rains for this market not to, in short order, getting very concerned about that current dryness up in these areas across the growing region. China demand moving old crop corn purchases to new crop, that's a question right now. It'll be interesting to see if they actually indeed follow through on that. That was kind of the scuttle in the market here about a week ago. I haven't seen anything come out yet in terms of them switching any of their old crop corn to new crop positions. So again, something that bears watching. And then this variant African swine fever outbreak in China. That again is something that has some concern as well. So again, that's kind of what to watch. Now breaking off into our programming in terms of why do we why do we work with these organizations, whether it's in the livestock area, whether it's in biofuels, or whether it's in grain marketing? Because corn and soybeans are a very important component of our state's economy. Corn is, and soybeans together are valued at $6.9 billion to Indiana. We're the fourth largest state in terms of production of soybeans and the fifth largest in terms of production for corn in our state. So, we're not as big as most, but certainly both of these crops are very, very important to our state. When we look at biofuels, our programming here, tends to focus around infrastructure and support of the retailing operations here in our state. We have relationships with all of these plus more. These are just the ones that were on the slide, but we're actually working off and on in terms of our overall infrastructure program here for the last 4 years, with over 10 different retailing operations here across our state. So again, these are very important to the overall upgrade of infrastructure that can handle higher blends of ethanol, which are an important component as we move forward into the future for ethanol to remain and keep that quantity of percentage in the tank for sure. Another thing that we also are working on is these future gasoline choices. 87 is what I pump in my car most of the time because it's the cheapest. But unleaded 88 is also another alternative that's out there for many of you that are watching this. So again, that's also a good option if you have a model year car that's I believe the percentage is like 95% of the cars on the road today can actually use that fuel. So again, what our commitment to the corn farmers is that as we move forward, low carbon, high compression engines are certainly something that requires that higher octane fuel as we go into the future. So when you look at the 95 RON button there or the 98 RON, again, these are all important components of helping support Indiana corn farmers, and more importantly, getting this fuel as part of the liquid fuel supply going forward into the future. Again, it's all about liquid fuels when it comes to our programming on corn and ethanol support here in our state. As we move into the livestock area, we do a lot of work with the USAPEC group, which is the Egg and Poultry Export Council here of the U.S. And it's really important to note how much is consumed by each of these major species that are grown here in our state. So when you look at the soybean side in terms of the meal, poultry clearly is the dominant species in terms of it consumes over half of the meal in terms of livestock production here in the U.S. But hogs are very important for sure in terms of both what they consume in soybean meal in the form of protein and also in terms of corn. Now, when we look at the overall impact in terms of what does that mean if we didn't have all of these exports leaving the U.S. in terms of poultry exports today, the scenario is pretty clear. If we got rid of those and kept everything else the same, it basically says that soybean prices would be down by 9%. So soybean prices today are trading above $14 in terms of cash values. So you'd be looking at almost $1.40 a bushel in terms of that overall impact to you as a farmer without these export programs. And on corn, it's also significant. It's down 6%. So again, when you look at that, corn's, for easy figuring, say it's right around $5. It's actually above $5, but say $5.50 even. That's 35 to 40 cents a bushel. That again is just tied up in that component of poultry production and what it means to just the export component, not counting what it does for what we do here in the U.S. for domestic demand. So it's a significant industry. And certainly that's one of the reasons why our organizations on both the corn and soybean sides are very strong supporters of USAPEC and what it does overseas. And when we look at current programming right now, we've got projects in Mexico, India, Vietnam, and these will be promoting, duck, turkey, egg production, broilers, and also a meeting space at the Gulf Food Show, which is one of the largest food shows in the world. So again, that's on the poultry side of what we support in terms, and that's on, again, both sides, both the corn and soybean side. If we go forward and look at USMEF, which is basically the U.S. Meat Export Federation, or U.S. Export Meat Federation. It's, again, very important to Indiana farmers in terms of what its overall impact is and the contribution to Indiana soybeans. Now, those previous slides kind of talked about it more on a national basis. These kind of drill right down into the Indiana side of things. And in 2019, pork exports added 9% per bushel of that value that was received by farmers here in our state. So that's, in those prices from your, marketing in a year and a half ago, that's 76 cents a bushel. That's a significant amount of value that it creates. And all of that was in the pork production sector here in our state. And if you look at it over a 10-year period, it's estimated that over $881 million of additional value is being created by having these programs working here, both here in our state that we support actively, but also from other states and other industries within this segment in terms of red meat for sure. So again, it's a very important component. And when you look at it in terms of market price versus export premium, if you just did it market with no exports, it's it's about $28 worth of value there. You add, over $18 worth of value by being able to export some of the less desirable cuts of meat, some of the variety meats that are available, and different components that normally would be sent to lower value markets for sure here in our country. When we go forward and start looking at some of the ideas in terms of where we're doing work, Vietnam and Colombia, the left is a USMEF promotion in Vietnam. The right one is an example of an in-store promotion in a supermarket. That was in Bogota, Colombia. And in addition to these retail events, we also are working behind the scenes to educate both chefs and influencers in these countries to really start looking or taking a harder look at what U.S. poultry and U.S. pork and beef all add to this overall mix when we start looking at both what we're exporting to them and certainly what they're consuming and how they're consuming it. So again, these are all important programs that have been long-term here in our organization. And so, as you can see, we've got these long-term relationships building in the biofuel space. We've got these long-term relationships with USAPEC and USMEF. And that carries right over into the grain marketing side, which is the U.S. Grains Council and the U.S. Soybean Export Council. Again, ISA and ICMC have been active in both of these organizations for many years. We've recently been very, very fortunate to have some of our board members of our ICMC board being elevated to positions of being on these boards, both at USEC and also U.S. Grains Council. So again, the leadership of Indiana farmers is helping carry your voice to these organizations that are working around the world. So U.S. Grains and Oilseeds, the method and the messaging that we're giving to our customers is they're sustainably grown, they're high quality, they're consistent supply, and we can logistically execute those, which are very important when your customer is halfway around the world and they're counting on that vessel to arrive for their processing plants or for their feed industries that are consuming those ingredients. We have representatives from all of these organizations, USMEF, USEC, US Grains Council, and USAPEC have all been in these countries during this pandemic that's really shut down a lot of travel around the world. So what that's allowed US farmers to do is continue to still have these influencers and these people working inside of those countries to continue to promote our products and our, to these global markets. And again, long-term relationships are a key component of what we're executing here at both ICMC and ISA. And so you say, well, what's the payoff on this? I just put up corn and soybean exports here, but as you can see, those bars show this steady growth from declines here in the past 2 years. And both of those export values right now are the #1 exports in total bushels of both corn and soybeans that we've ever seen out of our country. So again, that's a huge shout out to these organizations that we have worked with for years to again develop these relationships, to continue to promote how we're raising corn. We have trade teams that come in. Well, they didn't until last year. We had trade teams that came in, every year where we would again promote these same values, take them out to farms and show them how U.S. farmers are raising these crops and animals. And certainly it's one of those things that it ties you closer to that customer that may not have any idea of where Indiana is until he's been here and he gets to see the work that we're doing here. So one of the emergence of specialty crops has always been something that I think Indiana has been on a cutting edge for sure. One of those new products that's available and certainly that farmers can grow here in our state is High Lake soybean oil. And what High Lake soybean oil is a differentiated soybean that produces a different soybean oil when it's processed that is very high in oleic acid. And we'll get to a slide here very shortly that'll show you why that's important, but it has a huge component in terms of its stability in different environments and for different food manufacturing applications. But this is a program that ISA and other checkoff organizations have been into now for over 10 years. And what we've done here is where we see the benefits to farmers are quite simple. It's a value-added market. These products, in fact, High Lake soybean oil carries a premium, and it's one of those things that creates that readily identifiable value to the farmer, because now you're getting the soybean value plus a premium on top of that. So again, it's very easy for us to look at this and say, wow, this is an emerging market. Indiana has always been a leader in this production, and it's something that our farmers, I think, can take advantage of if it fits into their operations in terms of being able to keep this product separate from the rest of their commodity stream. But again, we've had this oil at Purdue University since 2019 on an ongoing basis. As you can see, that's a lot of bushels of soybeans that are being consumed by those students. I'm sure that even during the pandemic, they were still eating French fries. So at the end of the day, this has been a great cooperative effort with our state institution here for sure. And we also have partnered with our local processing groups here in our state. Both ADM and Bunge are both offering these programs out of their, Bunge's is out of their Decatur, Indiana processing facility, and ADM is working their program out of the Frankfurt facility. And again, if you want more information, you can go to our website on ISA, and all you have to do is go to the home page, which is indianasoybean.com/premiums. And you can see the actual programs, and you can call those facilities to find out, what the real value is right now, because these premiums have changed as we've gone through time here over the past several years, and they've gone higher, which is good because there's really a demand now for this oil, which is really a turning point in any kind of market when you're doing these types of investments and long-term both marketing and supply relationships. So that's the good news. The great news is that Indiana will still be the leader in terms of states across the U.S. that are, growing this crop. So again, in 2020, about 150,000 acres, and we're expected to plant close to 250,000 acres here in 2021. Is some of the current estimates that I've heard. So again, that's great growth. It's certainly something that we're continuing to work on, because again, we think it provides value to the marketplace in the form of this differentiated oil, and also value to the farmer in terms of a premium. One of the other things that we've done is we also sponsor these same soybean oil programs around the globe. Certainly, Korea is a market that is very important to the US in terms of its overall consumption of soybean oil. And 90% of all the soybean oil in Korea is used, is basically comes from the US to them. And Korea is also the first large international customer that has a real and true interest in high oleic soybean oil. So that's been, very, very important in terms of not only maintaining them as a good customer, but also in terms of the relationships that we built up with them over the years through USEC, and also our own programming that we do here at ISA. So that's a unique program that we sponsor on a yearly basis. All those individuals from Korea that you saw there in that video, particularly at the end when they were all lined up, those are all representatives of food companies, from fast food enterprises, real consumptive users of soybean oil in that country. And the program that we're working there teaches them the value and benefits of using US origin soybean oil to prepare foods, to use in food manufacturing, industrial uses, etc. So, I mean, that is a great way for us to partner. And one part about that overall environment that you saw in that video, in addition to we were there with one of our Indiana farmers who he sat there and got a chance to speak about how he carefully selects his varieties, he takes care of the crop during the growing season, and he carefully stores it and makes it available to the global market, or to his local processing plant who processes it into soybean oil that gets shipped to Korea. At the end of it, it's all this unified program, because in addition to having both U.S. Soybean Export Council and Indiana soybean folks in the room, we also had the executive chef for Purdue University on that trip. We had Susan Knowlton from Corteva, who's been very, very involved in high oleic soybean oil since its inception. And in addition to that, we had U.S. Embassy personnel there and people from the Foreign Agricultural Service there, along with their counterparts from Korea. So it's really it's not really it's not all about having programming that works at the retail level. It's all throughout that chain that really makes these programs essential and valuable and effective. So one of the other claims that we have that's been recently proven is there's this heart health benefit in terms of what it means to for high oleic soybean oil. And again, that's basically due to the overall profile and content of this oil. And when you sit there and look at, when they do consumer studies of this, 63% of the consumers would be more likely to purchase US grown 100% soybean oil if it was labeled heart healthy. So, again, that's a great claim for us to be able to have for that product in the marketplace for sure. And in terms of, the actual breakdown and why this oil is different, if you look at it, and when you're looking at, both Vista Gold, which is a high oleic soybean oil, or a high oleic soybean that's available, or was through Bayer and their associated companies, and then Plenish is the product that's available through Corteva. As you can see, they're both very, very high, above 70% in terms of their overall high oleic or their oleic acid content. And again, that's what's promoting the stability, because in these food service operations where you're using it for frying applications, etc. And then there's also other benefits that you see not only in the food space, but also in the industrial space. They found that high oleic soybean oil has properties that really lend itself to making manufactured industrial products out of it, like motor oil, gear oils, and things of that nature. So again, this is a differentiated oil. It produces an oil that has this different profile in terms of its nutrition, and it also has this heart healthy claim as well. So again, it's featuring a lot of these overall benefits with lower saturated fats, 3 times the amount of monosaturated fats when compared to conventional vegetable oil or vegetable oils globally. So again, it's an example again of where checkoff organizations have made these long-term commitments to make sure that the farmer dollars are being used in a wise and efficient manner to bring products to the market. And now it's great to see high oleic really catching on and gaining acceptance both here in our country and around the globe as we move forward that. So with that, I think that's my last slide, Steve.
Well, thank you so much, Ed. It's really exciting to see how the high oleic market is taking off. I mean, we saw that at 150 million acres in 20 and projected 250 million. Is that correct?
Well, that's 100. That'd be 150,000. We got
150,000. Excuse me. Yeah.
So
we're in Indiana, so 150,000 acres, but that's quite an increase from 20 to 21.
Yes.
And can you explain a little bit about some of the industrial uses the high oleic oil, some of the promise there that high oleic oil has in industrial uses, and some of the work we've seen already?
Sure. There's significant properties and some of the actual physical components of that oil, and they're called oleo. I don't know how to say the rest of it, so I'm not going to try. But there's components of that oil that make it very efficient and effective in terms of the lubricity and the manufacturing processes that they put it through in terms of some of the reactions that they put this oil through to convert it into these industrial uses for principally it's motor oil. You can actually go out on Amazon.com and purchase from the company's name is Biosynthetics, but they're making a motor oil that's made out of soybean oil, except it's from high oleic soybeans. So again, these unique properties have also been identified by Purdue University. Our new uses chair, Dr. Nate Mosier, has been looking at this now for several years in terms of it's something about the components and the mixture of these components in that oil that make it so effective for people to translate that into an industrial use, whether it be in the form of lubrication or in plastics and plasticizers. So it's been a very interesting search for this particular oil.
Well, that's great. And if, again, we've got the contact information. If you want some additional information about the HioLex or any of our other market development programs, feel free to reach out to Ed Ebert. The contact information is here on the screen. Just received word that Mike Caney, the chair of our Membership and Policy Committee, was able to join us today. I believe he's in the truck, but if Rachel, if you can bring Mike on, just get his thoughts on both the checkoff work and then the work that we've been doing as part of the Membership and Policy Committee. And again, I want to just emphasize that we're seeing that how this work is paid off, and we couldn't do it without membership. Mike, good to have you with us. Any thoughts from Ed's presentation, or the benefits that membership or the benefits that membership can bring to the farm, and the work, the advocacy work that we're able to do with those membership dollars? Mike?
Steve, can you hear me?
Yes, hear you just fine.
So I'm going to grow some HioLex soybeans this year and give it a try, and be the first time that I've grown any. And they're going to be delivered to ADM at Beech Grove there in Indianapolis. And we're going to give this program a try and see what happens. So, but it takes everybody to make a little effort to try a few just to see how they'll work on your farm. And if they work, it could end up being a good thing. So as far as membership goes, we don't pay for all our policy work with checkoff dollars. We can't use it. So we encourage everyone to be a membership of our policy team so that we can be out there and advocate for every farmer that's out there. So it's a great thing that we do, and Steve and Rachel work hard for us, and we just got off some virtual fly-in tours there that we did with our state or our federal officials, and it went really well, and we can't do it without these membership dollars. So we appreciate it if you become a member, and if you are, we thank you very much for your support. So that's all I got, Steve.
Well, thanks, Mike. And speaking of those virtual meetings that we were able to have with the Indiana delegation, trade was at the top of the discussion. Both searching for additional free trade agreements with countries so we can get those established and ship more products, but also support of the market access program and the foreign market development program. Very important to the work that we do with our cooperators, getting those dollars available so we can support the checkoff work that we do to establish those new markets. Thank you, Mike, for joining us, and Ed, thank you so much for your presentation. And again, thanks to FMC for their sponsorship. Great partner to have with us. Join us next week. We're going to have a presentation from Keiko Isom, and it's going to get into tax reform policy. So I know that with the new administration, different Congress this year, there's going to be some efforts to reform tax policy, and we want to get ahead of that, at least understand what those changes may be, and so we can plan for the advocacy work, but also make farmers aware of what changes may be coming, so they can plan accordingly on their farm. So next week, March, I think March 23rd is today. So
it'll be March 30th.
Yeah, do the math. March 30th. It'll be 1 week from today at noon. Please join us for that webinar. Again, thank you for joining us today. And I think we have another message from FMC that'll round out the program.
My whole goal in the last 25 or basically 30 years I've been in the business is making sure that the customer has the tools that he needs and also gets return on investment so he can be here next year. The potential for Xyway protection through the whole season is excellent. I love it, from top to bottom. No scheduling of airplanes, not an additional cost there. Plus we get nice benefits with yield, you know. We don't have to go back in and scout every acre. We just know it's got protection all the way through black layer, basically. Walking through the plots several times this spring and this summer, we saw a great control of gray leaf spot early. It was really nice to see that, and it was definitely a huge difference between the untreated check and the Xyway plot. Bigger leaves, darker green in the Xyway, a lot less gray leaf spot lesions. The ear is excellent. We got a lot of rows around. Very heavy ear, and we got a few more weeks to finish it out. But the tip back is minimal with the weather we've had this year, and it looks like a really nice ear. Jay had planted at 32,000, 34,000 population, so this will definitely fill up the grain tank. What a better way to protect the yield for a customer than to put it in furrow and have it all season long control of fungicide. We don't have to worry about timing of airplanes. The ease of application is so smooth with Xyway. I think as this opens up a brand new door for customers, farmers that don't use anything yet. It's just a great tool to put on planters and make them bushels. It's so easy to use. You do it at planting time. It's going to be great for the whole farming community to get more bushels as we progress in the, in the future here.